Yeah, so wanted to thank everybody for joining our opening day virtual event where we've got Ed Wheatley here to share a little bit about baseball in St. Louis. And we did an event similar to this regarding Ed's first book a few years back in 2018 about his book St. Louis Browns: The Story of a Beloved Team. We're really excited today to hear about his newest book, Baseball in St. Louis: From Little Leagues to the Major Leagues. Growing up in St. Louis myself, playing baseball for a myriad number of years, there's no one better to talk baseball with, let alone baseball in St. Louis, than Ed Wheatley. Ed has written 3 award-winning books. He's been nominated for an Emmy twice on 2 movies that he's produced, and actually won an Emmy award recently. Incredible mind for St. Louis baseball, and we're incredibly thankful for him to join us to talk about that book I mentioned a second ago, which is selected by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch as one of the top 25 books for 2020. So we're excited to hear about the book from Ed and share with us his extensive knowledge of baseball in St. Louis. Ed, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll remind everyone too, or I'll highlight for everyone, we do have a couple of awards that we'll give away at the end of the presentation. And until then, I'll turn it over to Ed, who will share some stories with us and some knowledge that we're excited to hear about. Thanks for joining us today, Ed.
Thanks. Enjoy all this. Always talking baseball, whether it's in a group, on the radio, on TV. It's always fun. This is the book, and everybody kind of looks at that, and so many people, they resonate with just even the cover, because whether they played at Heine Miney or Pond, or over on the east side, New Athens, or they were a Knothole gang member, or there's something about St. Louis. And fortunately, I grew up in the world of baseball. My father played professional baseball. I was around a lot of these guys, but he also had one of these tracks, from the city's playground leagues through the high schools to the professional baseball, the semi-pro baseball, the American Legion. And I still play about 104 games a year across the country in senior leagues. And it's taken me through these books and films, to a lot of world of across the country. My cell phone is full of who's who of baseball these days. And our books, as Tim said, the St. Louis Browns got picked as the best book published on baseball by several entities in 2017. The films have done well. I've been honored to have the opportunity to be invited and speak multiple times at the Hall of Fame on baseball, specifically the St. Louis Browns. And, I lead the St. Louis Browns Historical Society and Fan Club. But it's always been kind of a passion to come back and what is St. Louis baseball? Why is St. Louis, as I talked to Bob Costas a lot, why is it the best baseball town in America? And, I do this format of these coffee table books. I have hundreds and hundreds of baseball books. My wife would always give me books for birthdays, Father's Day, Christmas. I have a whole litany of books. My kids learning how to write, to dad. And it would always, is it good? And it's like, it's fine. It's nice. But, these are the books that I wanted. When she kind of said bluntly, then write your own damn book. And I did. And I did. And we follow this. And we got several books still to come. But you load a book with thousands of hundreds of pictures, pieces of memorabilia, take people back into time, bring back those happy thoughts and memories. And that's what this is. And one of the greatest happy thoughts is baseball. And I go to a lot of retirement homes just for the heck of it, and talk baseball with these people, because they don't have anyone who really can entertain them. And they just love talking baseball. And it's really because of what we have in St. Louis. And baseball in St. Louis is a 160-year evolution. And this is from my preface to the book. It's dedicated to all the players, umpires, and fans, no matter their sex, age, or race, who crossed all banks of St. Louis's rivers and contributed to the region's rich baseball history. It's a testament to their love of the game, all the way from little leagues to major leagues and beyond. It didn't matter if you were good or you made the major leagues. Sometimes you were the guy who rode the bench, but you were out there rooting and cheering. Once in a while, you'd get in a game and have fun. But really, what it boils down to is this evolution. And I was fortunate with all my connections in the world of baseball, especially here in St. Louis, the National Baseball Hall of Fame, Cooperstown. I was with their archives, the Cardinal archives, the St. Louis Browns archives, the St. Louis Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame, the Corey League, Carondelet Historic. They gave me all their stuff. The CYC, I had all theirs. Matthews Dickey's Boys and Girls Club, which houses a lot of the African American baseball experience, who I partner with a lot, had theirs, and all the individual community baseball associations and high schools. And more importantly, all the players. Some were, like I said, just high school players, and some were major leaguers. They brought me their scrapbooks and memorabilia, and it went into this book. So, what is it about St. Louis? And when I started writing the book, all I could think of was Susan Sarandon's character in the film Bull Durham. And she says, it opens up the movie Bull Durham. Her name is Annie Savoy. She's walking to the baseball stadium there in Durham to watch the Durham Bulls. And she's saying, as the talk over to the lead-in of Bull Durham, I've tried them all. I really have. And the only church that truly feeds the soul day in and day out is the church of baseball. And baseball in St. Louis is a religion. And opening day is our national holiday. You think about in a normal year, everybody takes off work on opening day. Downtown is packed. I used to sit and look down before I went to the game at all the pregame ceremonies, from the top of the Bell building where my office was. It was packed. And think about last year. We didn't have that. We lost it. And so, looking towards this week, last night we were talking about that on the radio. What do we expect to come this week, or excuse me, next week when the Cardinals are back here in St. Louis and they open up? Will people crowd, or what's going to be the protocols? So, but for St. Louis, baseball's a religion. You can be in anywhere, whether you're in a line at a bank, you can be in a line at a grocery store, and a person you may never know, you may never care about really, might turn around and say, did you see that catch, Harrison Bader last night out of the clear blue? And you can strike up conversations. You'll see a person everywhere dressed in cardinal red, and people will give you a nod, go Cardinals. It's that kind of thing that bonds, and why I call it a religion. And we have the best baseball town in America, and it really goes to the roots of the town's history and the fans' love of the game and the education of the game. And that's what we try to do this in the book. So to keep this quick, to keep it kind of in a format that, we want to get, because we want to listen to your stories and hear some questions you may have before this is all over. So to keep it going, one of the best ways in all these talks I've given all over the place is just to kind of look at the table of contents, because that tells you what's in this book. And we really start up here with the evolution of professional baseball in St. Louis. And we talk about how baseball came and took America by the storm. Baseball was not created in Cooperstown, New York, like the myth. And finally, I've been up to Hall of Fame a lot. And several years ago, the first time I was up there speaking, and even 2 years ago when I was up there speaking, again, they have started changing, Doubleday Field. It used to say, this is where baseball was born. Now they correct it. Baseball was actually created by Alexander Cartwright in Hoboken, New York. Hoboken, New Jersey. And so the myth is a little changed, but it didn't change what happened. And from New Jersey all across America came baseball. You got to remember, you got to go back in time. You got to paint the picture. There was no television, there was no movies, there was no iPhones with video games. People really didn't have much of entertainment, and baseball became an entertainment. And it was started out as an amateur game, a town playing another town, a factory playing another factory. And it was the entertainment for those communities. And that's what really made it go across the country, and people started to love the game. But then they started to turn pro. Why did they turn pro? Because it became this passion of entertainment. It also became competitive, and you wanted to keep the main guys on your team that were good. So you signed them to contracts. And the Cincinnati Red Stockings were the first team to create a professional contract situation, and that they claim them to be the original team. It's not the same roots of the Cincinnati Reds. The Cincinnati Red Stockings actually dropped out of the National League for a short time, and then they reinserted, just like the Cardinals. I mean, the St. Louis teams did multiple times. And that's why Cincinnati always has the opening game. And this year, the Cardinals have the honor of going and playing that opening game in Cincinnati. But so baseball became pro, and then there were leagues that started, the National Association, where teams would get together and form schedules and rules. And they were very kind of not very strong rules, and players would jump. But then baseball started with the National League in 1876. And the Cardinals were not here in 1876. There was a team called the St. Louis Brown Stockings that were part of the first National League team in 1876, and they played in 1876 and 1877. Then they got kicked out of the league because of gambling issues. Gambling was rampant in that period. So all of a sudden, St. Louis has a National League team, and then they don't. And then a man by the name of Chris von der Eye, you may have heard of him. He was an old German beer maker and owned a tavern down on Grand. He created a team called the St. Louis Brown Stockings again, and they joined the American Association, and they were tremendous. They won 3 titles in the 1880s. The National League got jealous, so they put a second National League team in St. Louis called the St. Louis Maroons. And they played 2 years in 1870s, and then they folded because of financial issues. But von der Eye's Brown Stockings stayed very strong, kept winning, and they were invited in 1892 to join the National League. They dropped the name Stockings, and so the irony of it is the team that we call the Cardinals today, their roots, as they entered the National League in 1892, they were called the St. Louis Browns. And they stayed that way until 1899, when they changed their name to the Perfectos. And a year later, they changed their name as they changed their uniforms to that lovely shade of cardinal red and became the Cardinals. And that's what you have today. So that takes it. St. Louis is a National League city. A beer man invests. That was Charles von der Eye. He makes it strong. And then in 1901, we get an American League is created. A year later, they move the Milwaukee Brewers to St. Louis. They take the name Browns again. So you can see throughout history of baseball in St. Louis, the name Browns is like a cat with 9 lives. It keeps getting associated with different teams. So in 1902, St. Louis, the fourth largest city in America, one of the most vibrant cities. It's gearing up for the World's Fair in 2 years. They now have 2 teams, the St. Louis Browns, the St. Louis Cardinals. The Browns were the better team. The Cardinals really were terrible. They were bottom dwellers. And for the next 52 years, they would compete for the city's love. And it's a battle that, is told in some of my other books and films. We tell it in here. But what it is all of a sudden we're talking about this town of America, St. Louis, its love of baseball. It has 2 teams, and think about that, what that meant. Throughout the 20s, all the kids in St. Louis, they saw everybody from 1902 to 1953. All the major league players came through St. Louis, whether it was American League or National League. Whereas, prior to interleague play, you never saw the American League. So all the kids growing up, they got to see Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Ted Williams, because both the American League and National League played here. So we talk about that, and there are big components of these 2 franchises and their historical steps, and most of you know a lot of that. And, it's what the value in reading the book is about, the history of those 2 franchises and their impacts on the community. And, the Browns left in 1954, but they were very important with crossing the color line, the invitation to African-American players. The Browns were the first team to have 2 African-American players. Bill DeWitt Sr., the father of the current Cardinal owner, Bill DeWitt Jr., he brought two African Americans to play for the Browns shortly after Jackie Robinson, within just months. And they were the third and fourth players. Larry Doby, a week earlier, had joined the Cleveland Indians. So St. Louis has taken these strides. And that's where we then kind of go back. We said, here's where we went and what we know is professional baseball. So how did we get here? So we say the rise of two new leagues. There was a federal league, and you may have heard of the Terriers in the 1914 period. They tried to be a rival major league, but they failed. But the St. Louis Terriers have a history and a tradition for 2 years. And it was also interesting to see where all these teams, the St. Louis Cardinals, the St. Louis Browns, the St. Louis Terriers, the St. Louis Browns, where they played. And that's the thing I'll get to at the end of the book to tell you where they played. But besides the Federal League, more importantly, and it is the Negro League baseball. And St. Louis has a tremendous, tremendous history in the Negro Leagues. You hear all the time about like the Kansas City Monarchs, but the premier team of the 20s was the St. Louis Stars. And the Stars had actually started around 1900 as the St. Louis Giants, and they changed their name to the Stars. And they were, men of Cool Papa Bell, Willie Wells, all these guys. There's 5 men in the Hall of Fame who played for these teams here, the Giants and the Stars, and they're forgotten. And actually, that's one of my projects I'm working on with the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. But this history of the African American community, Martin Matthews, he specifically said, "I want you to create a history because it's a forgotten history in our town." So, as these African American children up north, they don't play baseball. I go to those schools up in North County, and it's like they don't really know anything about it. So, we introduce them to the St. Louis Giants and how the Stars became the preeminent team of the Negro Leagues in the 20s. And then the 30s with the Depression, the Negro Leagues kind of almost shut down, and then they revived again briefly in the 40s. And that's why you hear so much of the Kansas City Monarchs. They were the premier team of the 40s. So what is their legacy? And that's what we talk about. And my thing just screamed. And the decline of the Negro Leagues happened because of the integration of baseball in 1947 with Jackie Robinson. But what about the youth of baseball? The love of the game in St. Louis starts early. Before there were organized leagues, there were playground leagues that were sponsored by the St. Louis Police Department. In 1946, my father's team won the St. Louis Public League, and we got all his trophies and ribbons, and he and his friends, their certificates and everything. And then there was the Corey League. If we, at the end of the presentation, we asked everybody how many people played Corey League baseball. Most men and even some women, because they did some softball, would say yes. Corey League is all over the United States, all the states. It was even taken after World War II into other countries. And in 1934, it all started here with George Corey and continues to be headquartered here in St. Louis. And few people remember that. And then there was a parallel. Some kids didn't play Corey League. They played CYC if they were tied to a Catholic church. And we then had all the suburban growth as people in the 50s migrated out of the core of the city of St. Louis into all the suburbs and all their organizations. And we have this legacy with a parallel legacy in a segregated world happening with Martin Matthews and Mr. Dickey and their Matthews-Dickey baseball legacy they created. So all this is evolving, and at the same time, we look at the high schools in baseball that shape America. And I'm going to go into examples of all these things I've been talking about on both sides of the river. We had great high school baseball that started in the core of St. Louis City. Then it's out now into the county. Same way over on the east side in Illinois, because I basically drew a 40-mile radius around downtown for all these people and collectively to put into this story. And we had these great high school teams. Some were recognized as the best high school teams in America. Beaumont High School in St. Louis had more men in the major leagues in the late 40s and early 50s than any other high school team in the country. Edwardsville in Illinois was recognized for multiple years in the 1990s as the #1 baseball team in America by the USA Today. So we have this great tradition, and with that tradition of high schools, you have great American Legion baseball, and St. Louis teams from both sides of the river regularly were competing for the national championship for the American Legion. And then, we had this segregated world that I spoke of, where African Americans, they couldn't play in some of the high schools, some of the American Legion, and they played at Tandy Park, which sits right across the street from Sumner. And the Tandy League was basically the minor leagues of the Negro Leagues. And great ball players, probably one of the greatest African American to come out of St. Louis, and probably one of the greatest ball players to come out of St. Louis. Elston Howard played there, along with several dozen men who would make it to the major leagues via the Negro Leagues. And we talk about that in the college baseball that was played here. So it's really all this putting together this history from, playing in a playground league to a Corey League to high school to American Legion to college, and who made it and who didn't, why some guys didn't make it. And then we picked the all St. Louis team, who were the best, who made it to the majors from St. Louis. And then I also do a thing about St. Louis ballparks. Where were they? Where were they at? So let's take a quick look at some of this. And, we got a lot of potpourri type questions, like the day Babe Ruth made his farewell to the world was not at Yankee Stadium. He did that the week before. On June 19th, 1948, weeks before he would die, he came to St. Louis because of an American Legion function at Sportsman's Park. And I can't tell you how many people. Actually, last night, a guy texted me and with pictures of his day there with Babe Ruth. And we got so many little stories, but let's look at a few things. This is one of the ones from the Corey Leagues. We'll talk about the Corey Leagues, and I put these pictures up here because when I talk, I can't tell me how many people would pull out this picture. And Doug Vaughn and I were talking on KMOV Channel 4 one time about the book and everything, and I talked about, and I showed up this picture here. If you were a good Corey League team, if you played the All-Star game or in the playoffs, your team would get pictured in front of this iconic scoreboard, at Sportsman's Park. This was a child's prized possession, to be on one of these teams and get to have that picture. And Doug Vaughn goes, whoa, my brother had that photo the whole time we lived in the same room growing up. That was his cherished possession. And for so many men, as they knew I was writing this book, they would bring me their picture. And, one of the ironies of baseball is this little advertisement, and I love like pictures like this to bring back memory, or even advertising. Quality Dairy. If you remember that, you remember before, when they used to deliver milk or even ice in those days. In 1959, when Channel 11 first came on the air, they didn't have enough programming. So you see advertisements like this where Channel 11 and Quality Dairy present Corey League baseball on television. They actually showed it because they didn't have any other content to air. So it's just all these little memories, and who were the great high school teams and the great players. And the best part of this book, and one of my favorite memories, is you may not have been a good ball player, or maybe you were, but you batted against Kenny Holtzman when your team played University City, or Jerry Royce when your team played Rittner, or maybe even Whitey Herzog when you played New Athens in Illinois. And they all come with stories. And Whitey calls me, and he was just like, "Man, Mary Lou is so mad at me because I haven't put your book down. You hit a home run," and he's going on about even when he was over the Mets player development, he brought people to St. Louis. Or he told me about how his team lost to Granite City in the state championship for Illinois in was it 48, because he muffed the ball in center field in the bottom of the eighth, or top of the eighth. He came in the ninth. He could have drove the man in from second to tie it, but he struck out. Just humorous stories. Or Jerry Royce was like, "You've got all the stuff that's in a shadow box." And Jerry Royce, who was a tremendous pitcher in the major leagues, he's showing me his photo in his office out in Las Vegas with all the things in the book. He said, "How'd you get these?" And he's showing me what he had. So it's bringing back those memories because, again, it's the love of the game. And again, this is Beaumont. This was the high school factory. And the interesting thing about Beaumont, not only was it they had more men in the major leagues than any other high school in the country, it's the story behind the story of Beaumont. Beaumont sits at Grand and Vandeventer right across the street from Fairgrounds Park. And on the site of Beaumont used to be Robeson Field, which from 1892 until 1920 was the home of the Cardinals. That's where the Cardinals played. The Browns owned and played at Sportsman's Park 5 blocks away, but the Cardinals played here. It was the last wooden grandstand in the majors, and it burned down. Finally, they had to find a new place to play, and the Browns took them in. It was probably one of the worst moves the Browns ever did, because if the Browns would have said no, the Cardinals were going to have to leave the city to find someone who would build a stadium for them. But I always said it was the ash of the burning grandstand on the field at Beaumont that somehow was absorbed to all those kids that went to Beaumont that put all those men in the major leagues. You know, my dad was one of them. And, you know, we talk about all the different players who went there and where they wound up. Or Roy Sievers, who was the first ever American League Rookie of the Year in 1949, went there. Beaumont was coached by Ray Elliott, had a tremendous national reputation, and they were the teams to always beat. Well, there were so many great high school teams. You know, after Beaumont, there was Central, there was Rittner, there was U City, and then it started moving out. You know, Lafayette. Lafayette has put, you know, with David Freese and Ryan Howard, all, you know, they've got like 7 or 8 recent men in the major league. So St. Louis still remains a factory. And if you had good high school teams, you had good American Legion teams. And St. Louis American Legion teams not only won many national titles, or were runners up. I know my dad, who happens to be right there in that picture, they were this year they were runners up, but they were regulars. He was there 2 years in a row. So St. Louis has always been looked upon across the country as this powerhouse of baseball. And it doesn't matter, like I said, if you were a star on a high school team or a star of American Legion, or even a bench rider on a high school team or Corey League team, you enjoyed the game, and your parents and grandparents were there watching you. And the thing of it also was, as we moved into the late 50s and 60s, there was a semi-pro league, a senior league in St. Louis that was better than most minor league teams across the country. St. Louis was producing these great baseball athletes. A lot of them, they got blocked and couldn't play in the majors because they would get signed, but the reserve clause. So many men told me they got blocked. They would sign with the Yankees or the Giants, and they wish they would have signed with the Phillies or the Washington Senators, and they would have easily made it to the major leagues. But in those days, once you signed, you were stuck. You could not be a free agent. The reserve clause was in play. And they came back to St. Louis, you know, after 2, 3 years, 4 years toiling in the minor leagues, and just said, I'm going to go back. I got family. And they had these semi-pro leagues. They played at Heine Miney. They played at Fairgrounds Park. They played at Baldwin. And you would have a team of 16, 18 guys. 10 or 12 of them had played professional ball on a team, and 3 or 4 of them had played major league ball. And they would draw thousands of people to watch at those stadiums, these men, because of the caliber of ball. And like I said, it was better than most minor leagues. So again, it's all the stories that go into all these little tales that I'm trying to highlight for you, and be respectful of time so we can get to some stories or questions. And, you know, we talked about, and like I said, I love loading these things up with memorabilia. And so you have these pieces of memorabilia from the Corey leagues, or you tell these like inside stories like corkball. You know, corkball was really created and invented in St. Louis. It really came out from a couple Catholic priests up in North St. Louis. And, you know, I can remember the 50s and 60s, and even in the 70s, like every little tavern around or every church had a corkball cage screened corkball cage behind the tavern or behind the church, where men would go play with this corkball, which is a little bit bigger than a golf ball, and this special bat that was a little bit bigger than a broomstick. And it soon, starting in World War II, took the country by leaps and bounds because it was a St. Louis game. And as the soldiers in World War II and Korean War went into service, they would teach these other players from around the country how to play corkball. I even got stories of Yogi Berra from his sister having to teach the Yankees in Yankee Stadium how to play corkball. So, you create all these stories and all these memories. And, I put it all together at the very, very end to say, who were the best of the best? And this was kind of my favorite thing to do. And there were so many, many, many great men who played baseball in St. Louis who made it to the major leagues. So who were the best of the best? So I picked 2 men at every position, and then 3 right-handed and 3 left-handed pitchers starting. And then I put several into the bullpen. And then we said there were so many great managers, someone had to manage, and so many great general managers, somebody had to general manage. And, this is one of those hot stove league debates, but somebody will say, well, what about so-and-so, or, what have you. But this was a great talking point to say who, what, and why. They got an asterisk there. Some of them, those guys with the asterisks are in the Hall of Fame. Probably nobody knows this guy here, and they'll say, Pud Galvin, who is he? He's a Hall of Famer. He won 300 games before Cy Young won 300 games. He played that early in the game, but he was that great of a pitcher. And he grew up in St. Louis. But, how would you like to face this pitching staff of Jerry Royce, Mark Burley, Kenny Holtzman, Bud Galvin, Max Scherzer, and Bob Turley? Some of those may not be familiar with you, like Galvin or Turley, but, Turley was from the east side in Troy, Illinois. He was a 1957 Cy Young Award winner. There's about 1,000 games won between those 6 men. And then, have to come in and face Jason Isringhausen, Bobby Miller, Kirk Reuter, Sonny Siebert. People go, well, who's Bobby Miller? He only pitched in the major leagues for 17 years, came out of Beaumont High School, pitched with the Cardinals and then the Dodgers. But, you look, people say, well, why is not Joe Garagiola behind the plate? There's no better all-round catcher than Yogi Berra in all the major leagues. Some people might say, well, Johnny Bench. Yogi, what he did was unremarkable. And, his set of rings with the Yankees, world champions and pennants. And Elson Howard, the greatest African-American to come out of St. Louis, MVP in the major leagues in 1963. Garagiola was just a journeyman and across all his teams in his few years that he played. He made his name outside the game. Elson Howard made his name in the game, and it's just a point of debate. We'll hear what your questions are. Who some of you may think. Probably the hardest one. Who was the backup shortstop? And I went to Dal Maxwell and I said, Dal, I need your help, buddy. Tell me. You're going to be my pick for shortstop, but I can't really think of one from St. Louis. That seems to be the weakest position. He goes, you're right. I've heard that so many times, but we settled on Jerry Buchek, who came out of McKinley High School. He is part of those Cardinal championship teams of the 60s. But so it was the fun to read because I support all this team with statistics and averages and, why this guy didn't make it over that guy like a Garagiola over Elson Howard or Yogi Berra. But that's just part of it. You've read the story of the love of the game, all the things that took place, and these are the guys who actually made it and were the best in the majors. Looked at where were all these played, and the interesting thing about it is this is blue line is Highway 40, this is Highway 70 headed out towards the airport. Here, this little green piece up here is O'Fallon Park. Where Cardinals are down here at the 2 Busch stadiums. But the interesting thing is the world of baseball centered around Grand Avenue. Grand Avenue running from Highway 40 all the way up to Highway 70. You have Fairgrounds Park, which sits right here at Grand and Natural Bridge. Van Deventer, as I said, came in at the middle of Fairgrounds Park, and that's where Robeson Field was. Up on the top is O'Fallon Park. Um, I can't lower it just because of the way I'm showing it, but that's where the St. Louis Giants played, right at that bend of Highway 70. If you're coming in from the airport to downtown, there's a big bend, and that's where the Giants, the other O'Fallon Park, and just a few blocks from Fairgrounds Park in West Boston's, like 2 blocks up from Fairgrounds. And you come down here, Grand and Doty, or Sportsman's Park. If you come down Grand on St. Louis U's campus at Laclede and Grand, right across from St. Francis Xavier Church, was where the Federal League team, Hanlon's Park, played. That's where the St. Louis Terriers played. And, we had down where the big bi-state mass transit terminal and garages. You'll see it on the south side of Highway 40 at Compton. That's where the St. Louis Red Stockings played in the 1870s. And just when you're coming in Highway 40 and you right cross Chaffetz Arena, St. Louis U's campus, and where they play basketball at Chaffetz, there on the north side of Highway 40, across the street, you'll see a baseball field as part of Harris-Stowe College. That's where the St. Louis Stars played. So these were all the professional teams and where they played. And you can see what a close, tight-knit, because this was the tight-knit community of St. Louis. And the other irony, as I said, for all those years that the Cardinals and the Browns either played 5 blocks from each other or shared the stadium, for 30 plus years, the same stadium. The fans of St. Louis, it wasn't like Chicago where you had the Cubs on the north side, the White Sox on the south side, or New York where the Yankees were way up north, the Brooklyn Dodgers were way down south, the Giants were another part across the river. Baseball in St. Louis all coexisted in this little tight area. So in 1928, while the Yankees and Cardinals were playing in this World Series right here at Grand and Dotier, the St. Louis Stars, about a mile down the road, actually won the World Championship. The World Champion baseball team in St. Louis in 1928 was not the Cardinals. They lost to the Yankees, but the St. Louis Stars won over a Chicago team. So that is the history. And I've got before and after pictures, what it looked like then, what it looked like now of these sites and the stories. The one I failed to mention was right here at Jefferson and Cass, is where the St. Louis Maroons and the 1884 National League team. So St. Louis actually had 3 National League teams. They had the Brown Stockings, the Maroons, and finally the Brown Stockings again, who changed their name to the Cardinals. But that stadium is now where the geospatial complex is being built. It's being built right on the footprint of that stadium. So that's kind of a quick overview just to keep this on track, Tim. And we said we wanted to give everybody like 15 minutes for questions. So I'll stop sharing and we can go back to whoever wants to ask a question or, tell us about your baseball experience in St. Louis. We got one from Todd. Who are the most critical, important Cardinals names who aren't widely known? I mean, the thing of it is that in St. Louis, people really know who the great Cardinals are, but across the country, they don't. And, that's what really gets me today is when I do book signings, whether it's Brown's books, these books, The Incredible Cardinals. The Incredible Cardinals was really written kind of to express your question there, Todd, because I find people don't even know who Stan Musial is anymore, these young kids. And, A lot of us, the millennials too, don't even know because they don't watch baseball. I mean, Stan Musial is one of the greatest in the game ever. You know, to know about guys like Grover Cleveland Alexander in the 20s, or
But
Rogers
your
Hornsby,
friend Joe
Frankie Fritz,
Cunningham,
Joe,
friend Joe Cunningham, man.
Joe Cunningham, um, who just passed away last week, was a good friend of mine. I was actually doing, I do Zoom calls with all these old former major leaguers across. I'll do a Zoom call across the country for hundreds of people and lead conversations with these players. He was a tremendous ball player when he played for St. Louis in the late 50s and 60s. He was a multi-time All-Star. And that's what we get. That St. Louis had so many great players. Because you got to remember the thing about the Cardinals, they went to the World Series in 26, 28, 30, 31, 34, 42, 43, 44, 46. Skip the 50s, and then they go 64, 67, 68, skip the 70s, and then, all the 80s and so forth. But throughout that period, and sometimes I get a little frustrated, tell DeWitt and some of these, that their Hall of Fame is about all the modern guys. And when you look at all those World Series of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, there's a lot of guys missing. The Cooper brothers. Mort Cooper was the pitcher. His brother Walker Cooper was the catcher, behind all the 42, 43, 44, 46 teams. Which ones they honor. Now, Mart has been honored. You got that whole infield. It was just, there's so many great players, from Pepper Martin to Frankie Frisch, Bob Farrell. It's like endless. And those are also the guys that, I focus on as part of, my collection behind me is all those old guys, because I do remember, and that's why a lot of my books will highlight them. So, you can take them off mute and people can just ask questions if you want.
Ed, I've actually got one. I've got one for you. So, kind of growing. Hey, I love this. Is just fantastic stuff. And I would say, kind of growing up in St. Louis. So I coach I coach baseball practically every single weekend now for my boys. And the thing I'm constantly telling some of the parents, reflecting on my own personal journey, is that you're going to wake up in 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, and there's going to be kids you're playing against right now in St. Louis and in the surrounding communities. You're going to look up and you're going to say, that kid's playing college ball right now. That kid's playing in the pros right now. He's in the minors right now. There's going to be 10 or 15 kids in our sphere of influence or in our circle that they're going to be bouncing around the minors, the majors, or anything along those lines. And so where my question to you is I totally agree. Baseball in St. Louis produces a lot of great athletes. Looking back through time and where we are today in 2021, where do you see baseball in St. Louis in the future? Do you see any material changes? What do you see changing in our culture of St. Louis baseball? Where do you see that going in the future?
Well, I think there's two or three things. First of all, when you see all these kids, and I've coached in high school. As I said, I still play in senior leagues and World Series all across the country every year. I play about 100 plus games this year again. Hopefully, with the pandemic, I spent 3 weeks in spring training, pre-tournament down in Florida. I just came back. Baseball's hard, first of all, to make it to the majors. And in the past, as I said, in the 1950s, baseball was such a love. We're talking about this commissioner now has cut them down to 4 minor league teams. Even the lowly Browns had 14 minor league teams in 1952. The Yankees had 24. The Dodgers had 26. And now there's only 4. So there's less people playing the game. Some of them aren't using the minors or going to college, but the game has changed. And with all the people who have played since 1869, when is kind of the visible date of starting professional baseball, only 19,584 or so have played the game. 19,000 in over 160 years. And of those, probably 27% have played less than 25 games. So you think about all the guys, you remember these call-ups in September that they got called up and then you don't see them the next year.
Never see them again. Yeah.
That's why it's hard. When I see all these parents out there, you're going to be a major leaguer. That's kind of why I took a detour and said, it's hard. There's things I want to do because, as you well know, playing minor league ball, you eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because you don't make a lot of money. It's only when you make the big time, and then do you last? Um, but baseball has changed. The demographics of our country has changed. As I said, I'll go into these schools, and who plays baseball? Who watched the game? The African American. That's experience in baseball was important to Martin Matthews to try to teach people, because African American kids don't play baseball. They watch football. They watch basketball. You know, as we get a more diverse and ethnic uh, society, soccer becomes an appeal. And the other thing that in this book and in my movies, I talked about in this my second film, the guys growing up and playing baseball in the 50s and early 60s. I mean, they were making $5,000 a year. Men would actually, who were good ball players, would not play baseball because they could make money elsewhere. And especially in the old days, if you came from a immigrant, like an Italian, especially it seemed like with the Italian community was very family oriented. No, you got to go get a job. You can't play that child's game and support the family. But now, for $5,000, these guys played for the love of the game in those days of the 50s and such. Sure, there were stars. It was $80,000. A Musial or breaks 100,000. That was not the norm. You talk with guys like you mentioned, Joe Cunningham, Eddie Mickelson. We played for $5,000. Now, a guy who signs for 45 million, which is more than two teams in the whole major leagues, and he's getting that much. Or a guy who's a pitcher making 30 or 40 million dollars, and he's only going to play in 30 games. He's making $1 million every time he plays. $1 million a game, and I think that's turning a lot of people off. And baseball, when it was in its premiere, there was nothing in town. The entertainment, you didn't have what this diversion of everything that you got from entertainment with TV and videos and streaming. You had baseball, and that's where I go into these retirement homes. These people love, that was their memory. And you got to think, these people who are in retirement homes today, they grew up in the 30s and the 40s. They lived when there was a depression, and they didn't even know where their money for food was going to come. They didn't have jobs. Then they finally rebound out of the depression. They go into World War II and the shortages, the rationing, and men going off to war and things. But there was one constant happy memory they have, and it was baseball. And Franklin Roosevelt said, "We will have baseball because I need it so people who can work hard to win the war can come home and sit and relax." And those are their happy memories, and it sticks with them today. And it really turned those happy thoughts into kind of becoming this religion. But unfortunately, like the headlines today's news and newspaper talk about, over 50% of the people are not members of a church. People are starting to not watch sports and things. And I think there's so many things, baseball now takes 4 hours or more to play. I did a book on the 1944 World Series, and no game was more than 2 hours and 12 minutes. That's how you play. The box scores prior to 1974, there's one or two pitchers. Now there's 8 pitchers. It's a change.
And all of them are making $10 million a year.
Yeah, so it's will it survive? Being a baseball historian, you really wonder, will it? Where are we going? I'm not sure. It's something that bothers me. The interest is waning, and they got to figure out how to bring it back. So
interesting.
Take some people off mute. If they got questions, we'll
go
for it.
If you raise your hand, we've got a couple more minutes. If you raise your hand, Marissa will unmute you and will allow you to ask a question. And I do have one more for you at some point here, Ed.
Sure.
Or a couple more.
Yeah. Or you can just unmute everybody. It's easier and let them talk. But no, it's just such a rich history. You talk about. I remember Andy Bennis when one night we were at a dinner, and he's saying, coming in San Diego, we don't have any of this history as players, as teams. Playing down in like a lot of the Cardinals with them down in fantasy camps and different things. They talk about it's not like this in other cities where you half stadiums are empty and the history, but the knowledge, St. Louis fans, knowledge of the game. A player on the opposing team make a great catch. Well, in Philadelphia, he may get hit with a beer bottle for making the catch, where in St. Louis he gets applauded.
Yeah.
It's like I said with the thing with Susan Sarandon and Annie Savoy from Bull Durham. It really stuck in my head.
Wasn't it old Rick Ankiel that got batteries thrown at him out in Philly one day or whatever it was? Yeah. Yeah. St. Louis baseball is a special place. It's a deep entrenched community, and I would argue at the youth level, it's a very, very strong community, one that you would project out in the future that would continue to grow. Ed, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I finished.
I was going to say, so you've done a lot of great work speaking into history at various aspects of baseball, whether that's baseball in St. Louis, whether that's a story for children in the book that you did in that sphere, or whether it's your work with the Browns. What's your next project you've got going on?
How about this, man? Do you recognize this? How many people just went back in time on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning? This is the bell, get it here on the camera, from Wrestling at the Chase. I could not get work on the books I was working on last year because the libraries, museums, and all the archivists were either closed or furloughed. A man came to me and said, "We want a coffee table book like the two you've just won all these awards for about wrestling at the Chase." And I said, that doesn't interest me, I mean, I knew it was there. I'd watch it a little bit when I was a kid because paint the picture. There was only 3 channels in 1959 until Channel 11 came on the air. And TV went off the air at either 10:30 or midnight. And he's going, "Well, I want you to do it." I said, "Well, trying to get the stuff." He goes, "Don't worry about trying to get the stuff. I own the rights. I got all the stuff." I said, "Let me make a few calls." I called Bob Costas. I called Joe Garagiola and Mickey Garagiola family, Sam Muchnick, the Copplers who owned the Chase Park Plaza and Channel 11. And they said, "We want you to do it." So the book has been written. It's with the editors. It's being typeset and everything right now. And that'll be coming out the fall. You'll be seeing a lot of promos and PR on it. We will be doing a film. I was meeting with the film people on that one as well. We're doing a film on baseball in St. Louis as well for PBS. Chase wants to do a big event down in the Corsand Room one more time when all these wrestlers are going to come to town, the old ones and current ones. And it's a cult. It's interesting. It's fun, but that's it is. It's something. I had more fun writing that sometimes than some of the other stuff because I was learning and researching. But there's a quick question, and I do have it in the book. I didn't mention it. Was there a girls team from St. Louis? There wasn't a direct girls team like if you've seen the movie League of Our Own, that great movie. I mean, I can't tell you how cool it is, and my personal experience. We did have quite a few women from St. Louis who played in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And in 2019, when I was up at the Hall of Fame, my second film, both of my films were picked for the Baseball Hall of Fame's film series. So my film was up there, and we were being shown on Saturday. And on Friday night, we had a big kind of VIP reception with the Hall of Fame, those movie producers. And the film that night, they were going to kick it off because they also had a reunion of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, the women who the movie is about. And many of these women are the ones you see at the trailer at the end of the movie. And I've got to know several of the women from St. Louis there and their family. And I want to tell you, those women were as tough and rough and cursing as a men's baseball team, and these gals were 80 and 90 years old. I mean, it was just the biggest blast hanging out with them all week and their stories. And I have subsequently stayed in contact with them. You'll see their stories in the book in here. And I mean, the All American Girls League was very much like it was in the movie. They thought it should have been more of a documentary, not so much of a comedy with Madonna and Tom Hanks and that. But the stories of making the movie there were pretty cool. But it was, I mean, they played hardcore baseball just like the men. It actually started out as softball by Philip Wrigley. But what they did is they stayed more kind of a north central, Iowa, upper Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, just because of transportation limitations that were occurring during the war. And they'd put this in place kind of to replace baseball because the men had to leave to go to the war effort. So it's a great story. And like I said, there are still women here from St. Louis who played in the league, and they're in the book as well.
That's incredible, Ed. That's incredible. Well, we are running up against the noon hour, and so I want to announce our winners. So we have two winners that will receive a signed copy of Ed's book, Baseball in St. Louis, as well as a copy of the Emmy awarded film, A Baseball Legacy, Fans Remember the St. Louis Browns. And those winners are Lynn Meyer and George Sullivan. So we'll get those out in the mail to both of you here shortly, but wanted to first and foremost thank you, Ed, for your time today. Thank you for goodness. I mean, I know this is a heart for you. You love this stuff, but there's a ton of a deep, extensive knowledge here about St. Louis history, St. Louis baseball, and then just our culture and our community. And want to thank you for the time that you've committed today. And all the preparation you provided, and thank you for attending this webinar. We're grateful for it, and had a ton of fun listening to your stories and listening a little bit more about the book. Thank you very much.
Baseball starts this week. Go for it.
Go Cards.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Ed. You have a great day.
You too.